Hello everyone, and welcome to this audio podcast synopsis where I will where I'm going to provide an overview aligned to the next audio podcast series under the Shientist Chartered Edition, which will be around the Excerpt Equipoise chapter. Previous to this audio podcast series, there was an audio podcast. There was an audio podcast series surrounding the Rogue Storm episode, which covered aspects relating to pathology, automation, massive transfusion regimes, pediatric transfusion, pre-transfusion testing, the provision of bone marrow transplant, the provision of bone marrow. The provision of blood for bone marrow transplant patients or recipients, the use of plasma products, and also and an overview in related to thrombophilia. In following, there was a sort of a brief intermission which covered two overviews. Two particular subject entities which related to wherein there was an audio podcast around the use for cryoprecipitate. There was an overview in a podcast overview, audio podcast overview, in relating to in relating to something that's referred to as in context of research. Research involved in relating to research involvement and participation. And basically, in this overview, I'm going to provide a sort of synopsis as in line aligned to a new another audio podcast series under the Shientist Chartered Edition, the Excerpt Equipoise chapter, wherein I'm going to highlight around therapeutic drug monitoring in chronic kidney disease, and look at this from a quantitative perspective on drug dosing and nephrotoxic medication. I'm going to look at supporting best practice surrounding systemic around a particular condition known as systemic lupus erythematosus, or SLE, and lupus nephritis, or LN. In BAM, amongst those in BAM communities or BAME groups, and the excerpt will look at the excerpt will look at this work, this overview, sort of from a cross-sectional study. And then I will provide an audio podcast around the adverse effects of anabolic and androgenic steroids on renal health, in related to renal health. And then there will be an overview in surrounding pathogenic mechanisms of cyst formation in context of kidney enlargement in AP in ADPKD, autosomal dominant polycystic kidney disease, and autosomal and ARPKD, autosomal recessive polycystic kidney diseases, and therapeutic approaches to alleviate aspects of PKD. I will provide an overview in an audio podcast in this series, on this audio podcast series, around a review, an overview of COVID-19 and pathology in context of the analysis and approaches to easing kidney disease burden or impact, and looking at this at from a pathogen communication and visualization perspective when laboratory practice is concerned. And I will provide, there'll be an audio podcast around the correlation of polypharmacy and the effect on renal insufficiency in chronic kidney disease patients and CKD patients, and looking at this in context of a compare and contrast investigation. There will be a audio podcast around focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, or FSGS, and looking at detection, prevention, and treatment around this, and understanding sort of in context of understanding the best practice around this. There will be an audio podcast in this series around the effect of renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system and blockade in CKD or chronic kidney disease. There will be an audio podcast as well in something known as nephropathy or diabetic nephropathy in context of diagnosis, management, and what makes best practice. And there will be an audio podcast in this series on chronic kidney disease, CKD, and interrogating the immunohematological response in context of an excerpt in an outline, an excerpt in related to an outline around a literature review approach to this. And also the final audio podcast in this particular series on the Excerpt Equipoise chapter will be around the need to consider renal health in transfusion care and research to inform best practice, and it will be an excerpt in context of a retrospective. Overall, this audio podcast will be a link and a sort of an overview in context of a collaboration between Storm Robotics Production and the Renal Patient Support Group, the RPSG, and aligned to an aspect of academic in context where there's an academia or academic collaboration as well. The overviews in this series in context of an audio podcast will be available to view through social media, through Instagram Storm Robotics Production, the Instagram page, and also through the appropriate Storm Robotics YouTube channel as well. So I'm providing this overview, and hopefully when it is made available, when it's organized, then hopefully those who have been following aspects in related to the Shientist and previous and other audio podcasts that have been made available. Hopefully you can catch this new audio podcast series as and when it's out. Thanks for thank you for tuning in, and hopefully you can catch the next audio podcast series under the Storm Robotics Production in good time. This is the Shientist and saying thanks for checking this out.